Good morning. I would like at this time to welcome back Pastor Ray and all of the Fiji team and thank you for a job well done in Fiji. While we as a church did not all go down there and take the long flight on the plane, and we didn't participate in all the missionary activities, we did play a part in it. We played a part by contributing in many ways, through our prayers, through our monetary contributions to the team, and the encouragement we gave the team, and the rummage sales that supported the team. And we'll talk about that in a minute. The title of our message this morning is "He Who Dies with the Most Toys Still Dies." Now, I actually saw that, a form of that, on a license plate frame many years ago before I became a Christian. And it basically said, "He who dies with the most toys wins." And I lived by that philosophy for many years. And until I saw a shirt with "He who dies with the most toys still dies" that one of the Christian friends of mine was wearing some time ago. So I thought it was a nice analogy to start the message with this morning. In our meditation verses this morning, Jesus spoke of a kernel of wheat and how it's impossible for it to do anything if held in your hand and never let into the ground. It never receives the nourishment from the earth and therefore becomes nothing other than the seed. It doesn't produce anything. So you see, if you cut a seed in half, you'll find in that seed a small little plant surrounded by the nutrients for that plant to start its growth when it falls into the ground. And without the fertile soil and the water, this seed can't produce a plant after its own kind. But let me give you an example of a seed that I received in this church. And we talked about a rummage sale in the past. I went to a rummage sale several years ago that we had for the Fiji mission team that was down in the old sanctuary. And I was lucky enough to be here before the men's fellowship on a Saturday morning, so I was here before 7. Was able to get in there a little early, and I always like to look around for books or something, religious books that are rare or insightful. And I came across a book that was published in 1881 by a pastor from London, England. And that was long before the invention of radio and television. And the insightfulness of that book was on the life of Christ through all of the New Testament. The descriptions of the places, the description of the political climate in those places, exactly what was happening at those times. And there were so many references that he had given to other publishers and other things that it was amazing to see that that was back in 1881. But what was interesting is as I read along, I found that there was a person by the name of Polycarp. And it's not a fish. And I would like to ask you by a show of hands, how many of you know who Polycarp was? Oh, 2 or 3. Polycarp, for your information, was a student of John the Apostle. And he was a pastor of a church in Smyrna. What's interesting about Polycarp is he was a very zealous preacher, and he followed the apostles' teachings to the letter, and he was very much a believer in Jesus. At 86 years old, he was under persecution, and so was his church. At that time, he was asked to renounce his faith in Jesus. But what he said was very interesting. He said, 86 years I have served him, and he never did me wrong. How can I blaspheme the King who has saved me? And after that statement, he was burned alive. Now, I would have never had any idea who this person was if somebody hadn't donated that book to the rummage sale, had given that treasure, the way I look at it, up to a church rummage sale to support a Fiji mission. Many of the other information in that book including that person named Polycarp, was pretty much common knowledge about 50 years ago, from what I've been told. And I find it interesting to find the nuggets of truth from somebody's donation. You see, if this person had just kept that book on his shelf, or her shelf, and I still don't know who donated it, it would have just collected dust and continued to disintegrate, because the pages are so fragile you have to take them and turn them very slowly, and the print is so small you have to read with one of those magnifying glasses, especially when you get older. So it's very interesting, and they're faded. They're really kind of dark brown now. But let's read in your program point number 1 about our stuff that never does anything stored away. If we'll read together, in John 12:24 comes directly out of our meditation verse. Ready? Begin. I tell you the truth. Unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. Now let me put that verse in context. Jesus was talking about himself. But this verse talked to me years ago in a completely different way. You see, when my wife and I first bought our first house, there was no garage. It was an apartment. And I had 2 Kenwood speakers that I had had ever since I was in high school. And I had put those speakers in a closet and said to myself, well, when I get a house with a garage, I'll mount them up in the rafters so when I'm working on my car, I can listen to music. And those speakers sat on the shelf for a long time. Many years passed. No house, no garage, and that still hasn't happened. So when we renovated the place at one point, that verse spoke to me, and I donated those speakers along with a lot of other things, realizing that what I had was not going to do anything for me sitting on a shelf. It isn't going to do anything for anybody else if I just hoard it and keep it on a shelf. So I gave it away. That's hard for a person like me who's a pack rat by nature. I work on a construction site. The amount of construction debris that gets thrown away that is still usable is amazing. And if I had a piece of land, I'd probably fill it with those things. But I realize from that verse, you can't do that. You have to give away what is not useful to you so somebody else can use it. George Carlin, the comedian that recently passed away, had a part of his monologue that said the only reason that we get bigger houses is to put more stuff in them. And it's interesting because while we may not economically be able to do that right now at this time in Hawaii or throughout the nation, the storage place business is booming. You see it on the TV all the time. You can rent space to store away your stuff. And it amazes me, after several months of storing away your stuff, you could have bought it again brand new. But that's the mindset that we have.